We have come to the end of the questioning of Stephen Beels, the former detective sergeant in the Special Demonstration Squad from 2001 until the closing of the unit in 2008. The further questions for him were singular, and he didn't remember anyway. It was to do with the reporting on Maya that Robert Hastings had done at the same time that he was deceiving into an abusive sexual relationship. Rather than talk about any other bits of information that came from today's hearing, though I'm sure we will touch on them, what we thought we'd do at this end of day video was talk about all the things that weren't talked about Robert Hastings, about Stephen Beels, rather. Stephen Beels had a career after the Special Demonstration Squad. I'm joined with Ian Lubbers and Donald Driscoll of the Undercover Research Group. We've done a lot of research on this. There is a new article that's just been published, as I understand, on your website.
Yeah, on our new website, we've just published a first profile of Stephen Beels that does include his career, but also his post-STS career. He retired from the STS. STS finished, I think, and then within a month joined a firm that was selling the same and similar information to companies, and he must have made good money with it.
So just in terms of dates, the unit closes down in December 2007, January 2008. In February, he is employed as head of operations for C2I.
Straight in there.
Yeah.
So one of the big questions is how did he have this contact? Well, we know that Wilf Knight of True Spies fame, not of STS fame, despite claims to the contrary, also worked for this company.
Yes, and what I have here in front of me, what we haven't published yet, but we will, we've got loads of internal documents from this company, is a very long list of groups that company provided intelligence on, like that they were pitching. Basically, that was Beels' task at the first few months, pitching to BP, air companies, all kind of. It was like environmental companies. I'm just going to summarize. They thought environmental campaigns were the most important at the point in time. And they offered information about Rising Tide, Plain Stupid, Smash Edo, Stop the War Coalition, Dissent, Disarm Nation. How do you spell it? I always forget. The rebel, the clandestine insurgent rebel, clown.
No.
Yeah. So what now?
Clown Army, basically.
Yeah. Clown Army.
Cadafrank's network.
Can I finish my sentence, please? The Clown Army was also infiltrated by the STS, as was the Cardiff Anarchist Network before Beels' time. But how did he know about all these groups? What did he know about them? Did he take a filing cabinet, or rather some USB sticks of information with him? Did he have like direct access to his ex-colleagues and their information? That big questions that have not been addressed at all today.
And it should be pointed out, this is part of a bigger picture. You know, we've heard a lot about McLibel and the passing of information by special branch onto companies. It's really going to come up in tranche 4 with Kendi and Global Open. And, you know, there's whole lots of links between special branch and these private companies. And it is of direct relevance to the inquiry because it's about blacklisting. It's about getting identities of individuals so that they can not be employed. So if you go to this, go, oh, do you know who Tom Fowler is? Yeah, you do. He's a well-known anarchist.
You won't get that job. Yeah.
So it's got this real effect, as well as the their attempts to disrupt civil society. It's a profoundly anti-democratic process. These companies are about taking away your Article 10 and 11 rights.
And then not even speaking about how all the information that was kind of like not illegally, but sort of secretly stored by the SDS Special Branch and MI5 is now sort of getting into the hands of companies that you have even less of an idea what they're going to do with it. Like at that time, loads of power companies, flight companies, they started their own security departments, which often hired someone who had worked either in Special Branch, SDS, or the Animal Rights Index, National Index, ARNI. And they didn't only take their knowledge with them, but also their access to their ex-colleagues. And what you see is like a huge gray area of where there's even less of control of what is happening to information about people, private information, about groups, and like Donald said, the undermining of your rights to demonstrate and change society.
And it's also in this time that you have all the big injunctions against protesters happening, and we know that the police, particularly through NetQ, were actively supporting the companies. So a clear question is where's the roots? Beels is one of the steps in that stage. It's a really obvious one. Where's this intelligence on people's personal lives ending up? And if he's part and parcel of passing it on, then this question should have been put to him.
And it's such a big miss of the inquiry not to touch upon that upon this subject at all today. In general, it was like quite rushed because he only had one day, or not even a whole day, and we got the impression that the barrister was just ticking off boxes, going through her questions, not even listening to the answers. If he said something, even when he said something that was my language was interesting enough to sort of dive a bit deeper, she just missed so many opportunities.
And it should be said that this company also ran its own infiltrators. Part of his role was to run people going into these. So one of the key companies, well, two of the companies that organizations were talking about, Plain Stupid and London Rising Tide. Well, one of the women from C2I, Veronica Todd, was in London Rising Tide, spotted by them. You had another farcical one where they tried to put Ken Tobias or Toby Kendall into Plain Stupid. Now, we know that Lynn Watson targeted Plain Stupid, among others. And London Rising Tide, that was infiltrated by HN66 Dave Jones, who was in the SDS at the same time as Steve Beels. It stinks. It's like, it was a really obvious question. And another question around all of this is, what were the guidelines? What was the regulations? What was he told about on leaving the special branch going into this world? My suspicion is there was none. There was just like nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Don't get caught. And there's to tie this up into earlier stuff. We know in the 1980s, that special branch files, the files that they're gathering on us, then all these reports are going into. And they keep saying, oh, no, there was only for internal, it was all special branch, it was just going into one giant database and nothing ever happened to it. Richard Taylor Norton, in one of his 1980s books, talks about a network of special branch officers circulating special branch files in private companies. So again, the inquiry seems to be willfully ignorant. It's like, this intelligence isn't just disappearing, it is going out there. And the fact that it contains the names of Emily's kids is shocking.
And yet another thing that we've hardly been talking about is that in this period, in the early 2000s, activists start to use the internet a lot. And what we see is that these private spies of the company that Beels ran, but also of others, what they are on mailing lists, they are on online discussions, online meetings. There's reports that show that they were in those meetings, which often was not too difficult, of course, but still, like, we haven't heard anything about the STS going online, or using the modern technology. And the fact that it was done, it could be done, and it was done, is very important. It's a very important point that the inquiry should take on.
Yeah, for example, what was the guidelines around posting on indie media or Urban 75? Well, if they're stirring stuff up, or they're writing inflammatory stuff that's then used to justify their own deployments. As a sergeant, as a sergeant overseeing these officers, that's a very basic question. And we see, go back to Hastings time evidence, we saw lots of reports about, when they had to fill out the timesheets, he's spending up to 5 hours a day just online, getting paid to be just online as an undercover officer. None of that has been asked, obviously. Like, what about, we came in touch on Simon Welling's role in the G8. Brushed over was the fact that Wellings was involved in the media, or tried to get involved in the media team. He was like, wait a second, you're trying to get involved in the journalist side of things. That's questionable. All Wellings lies around, what he was involved in, which was a big feature of the previous tranche, quite quickly brushed over. So, he's asked about dissent. Dissent was this strange amorphous thing. It's like, there was far more egregious examples of the wild claims, and like Beels says Wellings says somebody in the office, and it's just like no attempt to dig into this. No look at all at the politics of the closing of the unit, when it was clear it was under huge pressure from within the Metropolitan Police. There's clearly dissent, there's clear anger, there's different reasons, all swept under the carpet. And yes, there's a lot of managers who can speak to that, but he's the one on the front, one of the ones on the front line, talking to the undercovers, who's able to convey what was happening there, not what was happening on a very high level where they didn't have the full picture.
And one other thing that might be important to say is that Stephen Beels has been through quite a lot of private intelligence companies and was working between November, up until this date, like between November and 2018 and January 26, he worked as an independent fiscal security auditor. His LinkedIn profile is full of it, and he launched a methodology developed by himself as recent as May 2025. So, like, when did he retire? 2008, and he's still peddling all the information that he earned while working with the STS and Special Branch.
But he had no knowledge whatsoever of the STS and finances, and the fact that they were clearly all defrauding. Taxpayer.
He claimed to not remember pretty much anything today, right? The levels to which he talked. It was as if his role as an undercover handler was just this thing from years ago that he had no real. Oh God, it's so long ago. This whole area is like a bit of a thing in the back of his mind. The reality of it is he's been doing the same sort of work ever since, and using the same sort of methodology, the language, everything about it. It's just not credible that he's the person who's been presented to us today is a fiction. What we know of the man since he left the STS suggests that very much. Yeah.
What more can we say? It's been a long week, I think.
I'd really encourage people to read the article, and we'll be sharing widely that article. As Evelyn said, there's even more to be added to it in terms of the various organizations that he was hawking around as having information on. That concludes this week at the inquiry. There is currently another hearing taking place. It's a private hearing. It's Helen Steele. It's around areas that weren't able to be heard in open session. It's meant to be just an hour. I don't know if that actually will be the case. I can imagine it taking a lot longer than that. But we are finished for this week. We'll be back again next week. We've got another full week of witnesses. Which,
HN 58 and HN 53.
Yes, the filing cabinet, the officer who has been trailed quite heavily, really, by by Mike Dell as being the person who knows so much. He'll be later in the week, but we start the week with HN 58. 3 days of 58. Do you want to say anything about 58 before we?
I think we're going to see he's been touted as this yet another upstanding manager, but he's very much the Lambert and Edmondson show continuation. These are people with former undercover backgrounds come in, and it seems to be part of the decline of an already very declined thing. So it should be said that 58 was before Dell.
Yes.
So a lot of the context around Dell coming in and setting standards should actually be read, and it's like he's taking over from 58's lackluster management.
Yeah, and when Dell was questioned about the handover, he was for someone who wasn't particularly vague most of the time, he was very vague about, I couldn't remember the 2-month handover period, what he was told, what he wasn't told. He seemed very keen not to throw 58 under a bus. 53, on the other hand, he was like, well, he knows everything. And again, actually, we heard it today from Beels, him saying that 53 had meticulous records on everything and will be able to tell you everything about the rent book. So we look forward to that.
And it's 53 who does supposedly does the investigations into Thompson and stuff. So it'll be a lot more about those failures.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, 53 will be giving evidence next Thursday and the following Monday. So whatever he comes out with at the end of the week, we'll have plenty of time to pick holes in it before he comes back around again. But that's it for this week. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for watching along. If you've got any questions or things you think we need to look further into or you'd like to know about, remember, you can come to the inquiry yourself. There's plenty of space in the public gallery. There's not many of us who have been here for the last few days. There'll be definitely a lot of students this week for some reason. But apart from those, there's plenty of space. Please consider coming down if you're interested. If not, we'll be following so that you don't have to. Please consider supporting this work. You can buy me a coffee on ko-fi.com/Tom B. Fowler. The link will be somewhere in my profile. But thanks for now.